Hey guys, it's Kara Brown. I'm back for another video, and today we're going to actually talk about main characters. However, before we dive right into that, I do have a quick announcement, and the announcement is that next week is finals for me, and when it comes to being an adult and having to make priorities, you have to make choices and sacrifices, and the sacrifice that I am making is that I am not doing anything on social media or YouTube at all next week. The next time you guys are going to see me is going to be after March 16th. But we're here now, so let's go ahead and get started. I've been waiting for this topic to come up on Twitter for a little while. Usually every week on Saturday I throw up a poll. I'm like, hey guys, what video do you want? And I had main character up there for a really long time, and it only got picked last week. Now, when you think of a main character, you usually think that they are the most important character that happens in the story. And if you've seen a previous video I did where I talked about villains, that's not true. Your most important character is going to be your villain, and your second most important character is going to be your main character. Making a main character can be really difficult for a variety of reasons, and what I'm going to cover are usually the most things that I see that happens in writing group when new writers come with their characters and the characters either aren't likable or they're not realistic or they're lacking in some kind of capacity. So let's just go ahead and jump straight into this. When you make a character, you have to consider a lot of different things. You have to consider their backgrounds, their interests, their religious preference, their relationships, and how all of that affects who they are, what they are, and how they can do things. It also affects how it can hinder them as well. For example, the way that somebody in high society lives isn't the same way that a pauper is going to live, and the same way that somebody who lives in a city is not going to be the same as somebody who lives out in the country. There's a lot of different things that go on, a lot of different values, and it kind of shapes who they are and their reactions to things. Not to mention that there are also regional differences. Even though England and America both speak English, their cultures are vastly different. That's why when one goes to visit the other, there's always some kind of culture shock that happens. It's really important to take all that into consideration with your character and try to work it into how it shapes their mentality, their approach to things, along with the things that they value. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is the thing that I usually don't see when a new writer comes in because they're getting carried away with the story, but it's the character's problem. When you have a character in your story, your character needs to have some kind of problem. I mean, that's the whole reason we're reading this. Your character's coming in onto the stage, they have some kind of problem, we instantly want to know how they're going to solve it. If you have an opening chapter that's like in the life of Joe, and Joe goes to the store and buys groceries and says hi to his neighbor and helps her take out the trash and goes inside, you don't want to have conflict, you don't have a problem, and you don't really have a story in that. It's boring. Nobody's going to want to read it. We're here for conflict. We're here to see problems happen and problems be resolved. So make it clear early on in your story what your character's problem is. So for example, in my story, Queen of Swords and Silence, that is coming out in April. Did you guys all know it's coming out in April? It's fucking coming out in April, y'all. In that story, Ghost is a social outcast. Her entire pantheon hates her. They pretend she doesn't exist, but however, because she is useful, they do make her go do things, but they make her feel like shit when she goes and does them. She's not a happy person when it comes to the relationships that she has. And probably the last thing that you need to consider when working on creating your character is figuring out what vices that they have. You know, what are bad habits? What are things that they do that aren't healthy? Frequently, a lot of times when people make their main characters, they want their characters to be perfect, and perfect is boring. You should not do that. You have to have some kind of vice, something that they do that's unhealthy, whether it be a therapy shopper or you can have Ghost's bad drinking habit. It doesn't matter. And if you create a vice for your character where they're just too kind and too giving with other people, I will cut you with this Nerf thing and it will hurt a lot, okay? So I can't actually use a real knife, but I think you get the point. Harry Dresden from the Dresden Files is a character with a lot of faults. For example, he usually mouths off to the wrong people, which ends up getting his ass kicked. He takes hasty action, sometimes he overlooks facts, all this other stuff. And it's always stuff that he has to pay for later. And if there's one thing that usually fans of Harry Dresden like, it's watching him pay for things that he's done. We went ahead and covered everything that's usually the most reoccurring things I see that happens in writing groups. So I'm going to venture into some of the other aspects that I see that happen in general fiction overall. These are areas I don't see are touched on very well or not always fleshed out, especially when it comes to debut novels. So if you're working on your debut novel, I hope that these suggestions that I provide to you will be helpful. Let's go ahead and we'll talk about relationships. And I'm not talking about romantic, I'm just talking about relationships in general. What kind of relationships does your character have with other people? How many friends do they have? How well do they get along? How do they not get along with people that don't like them? What is their overall response to society and how society treats them? My character is hardcore and doesn't have friends. Ghost is a social outcast. Everybody hates her, but she still has a couple people that like to hang out with her. These people are kind of weird and strange, but that's usually the kind of people that want to hang out with people like Ghost. And at the end of the day, it's not going to be your plot that your readers are always going to remember. It's going to be your characters and the way that your characters, work throughout the story. And another thing to talk about is the motivation. Why is it that your character is doing the things that they're doing? What is stopping them from doing something else? Like, why are they on this particular track? Is it because that they have to get asked out by the Homecoming King for the next dance, or because they have to save the world from annihilation? Ghost in my story does everything that she does because she doesn't want to go back to prison. She was in prison for a really long time. She didn't like it, so everything that she does now is in hopes of never ever going back. The next point I want to bring up is actually a huge pet peeve of mine, and it's when your character has some kind of magical or space or mutant ability that they can use whenever they want, but there's no price to pay for it. Just like I talked about how your character needs to have some kind of vice, your character also needs to have some kind of consequence or cost for using some kind of magical power or disability, whether it be, exhaustion, going into a coma, losing blood, whatever. It needs to happen. There has to be consequences for abilities that are used. There was an anime that was called Darker Than Black, and in that anime there were a whole bunch of people that had a whole bunch of really amazing powers, but in order for them to use those powers, they had to do some kind of action or deed in order to charge it up, whether it be eating a lot of food, eating hard-boiled eggs, or having to fold the corner of books. I know some of you just screamed at that, but they all had to do something in order to use that power, and depending on how far they went into using it depended on how much they had to charge it up before. I think the only actual character that I met that had abilities that didn't have any kind of restrictions or cost was going to be One Punch Man, but that was balanced out by his actual social and inner dilemma, so it was still really entertaining. And I think what's really sad is that these examples about overpowered characters that were kind of semi-done right are all anime-based. I haven't actually found one that was literally done-based, so if you actually know any of those books that kind of feature that, where you have a super powerful character that can do things without cost, but the story is still good and entertaining, it's not a Mary Sue, please link that down below, because I obviously need to read one. And the very last advice that I can give you in regards to shaping your character and keeping them from being flat or stagnant or a Mary Sue is that they have to pay for things that they do. There need to be consequences for actions that are taken. If you have a character who goes and they do something and there's no repercussions, or everybody agrees with them or decides that they're right, and you have characters that whenever they confront the character about something that they've done and then they end up being the bad guy for it, you have a Mary Sue. Your character has to make mistakes and they have to pay for those mistakes. It's going to hurt you to do it, but it's going to be really fun for us to read it. So, make it happen. If you get bonus points if you can have your character face a consequence for something and your readers are going to be like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening, no! And that's pretty much everything that I have seen that's been a reoccurring problem when people are trying to create characters and they're just not working out. This is not everything that's involved with creating characters. There's a lot more that goes into it, but those are the reoccurring issues that I see, especially with new writers who come to a writing group. If you like the content, please feel free to subscribe, hit the bell below if you want notifications. I update usually on Wednesdays and Fridays, except for next week because finals. And if you are very curious to know if I actually have any credibility when it comes to this writer nonsense, I have a short story that is out right now. You can either pay 99 cents for it, or you can sign up for my newsletter and you can get it for free. If you sign up for the newsletter, you also automatically get entered into a giveaway where there's some fabulous prizes. There's a mug, some books, stickers, swag. Enter. If you've already entered, you're automatically entered into the giveaway. If you want to be, then go ahead and do it. That's all I got for you today, and I hope you all have a great weekend.